Adam Walsh, please report to the toy section. Your mother is waiting. That sterile voice ghosts through the Florida Mall's speakers. 1 time, 2 times, every 15 minutes. Nobody answers. Not a single kid bursts from behind the garment racks. The game aisle sits completely dead. With every ticking second, a sickening chill creeps across the sales floor. The unthinkable has actually happened. 6-year-old Adam Walsh vanished into thin air on July 27, 1981. The exact moment American innocence died. Let's rewind the tape. The morning started beautifully in Hollywood, Florida, with a typical first grader glued to the television screen. John Walsh gave his kid a quick peck before hitting the office. The guy was peeking a hotshot hotel executive leading a $26 million venture. Meanwhile, his wife Reve juggled motherhood with evening classes in home styling. Picture the ultimate suburban fantasy. A gorgeous house, booming careers, and their absolute pride and joy, their only child. The grieving dad would eventually describe his boy as the textbook perfect kid you'd pick from a magazine. 3 foot 6 inches, golden brown locks, piercing eyes, and a ridiculously cute freckled smile. They called him Cooter, a huge sports fanatic. A talented little artist who idolized his mom and dad. Right near 11 in the morning, Reve buckled him into their silver sedan. Just a routine day of chores. They swung by the local academy first, dropping a $90 deposit to secure his fall enrollment. Next, a quick 5-minute ride to the shopping plaza. Rev had stalked a lighting fixture clearance for ages. Clutching the promotional flyer, she knew this trip was finally the payload. Pulling into her standard space by the northern doors was pure muscle memory. A quick retail run, then straight to her fitness routine. She trained hard for fitness shows. But scoring that bargain took priority. Walking past the customer desk, the young boy locked onto the ultimate prize in the play aisle, a fresh-out-the-box Atari 2600. Pure sci-fi magic back then. 1 glowing monitor, 2 joysticks. Children swarmed the console, desperately waiting to try the newest arcade hit. The boy's face completely illuminated, pleading just to stand there and observe. His mom checked the room. Uniforms everywhere. Crowds buzzing, clerks at every register, plus the local precinct sat directly across the street in plain view. High noon. Incredibly safe. Absolutely 0 red flags. "I'll be right over in lighting," she promised him. "Just a couple rows down." "Got it, Mom, I know the spot," he answered. As she walked off, her boy was buried in a tight crowd of kids awaiting their shot. She strolled to her destination, staying so incredibly close she could practically spot his haircut. 10, maybe 15 minutes tops. She hunted for the merchandise, but the shelves were totally bare. A worker checked the stockroom to no avail. With the main clerk eating lunch, Reve simply jotted down her contact info and bounced. She looped right back to the play stuff. Every single kid had vanished. The console sat completely deserted. Pure panic spiked in her chest. She screamed his name, tearing up and down the walkways. Dead silence. Rushing the main desk, she begged them to broadcast an alert. The microphone buzzed to life overhead. "Adam Walsh, please return to the children's section. Your mom is here." Nothing but dead air. In a crazy twist of fate, the grandmother was actually browsing nearby. Bumping into her frantic daughter-in-law, she instantly joined the hunt. The family and frantic workers ripped that department store apart. Every 15 minutes, the intercom blared the missing child's name like a broken record. But a dark secret was brewing behind the scenes, something the corporate giant actively buried. Right around noon, practically the second his mother walked away, a scuffle erupted. A group of kids got intensely territorial over the joysticks. A teenage security hire named Kathy Schaefer rushed to stop the chaos. She was practically a kid herself, undercover, unequipped, totally guessing. Figuring the crew rolled together, she grilled the first half about their guardians. When they admitted they were solo, she booted them out the northern doors. Next, she zeroed in on the others. She repeated the interrogation. The older kid denied having adults around. The tiny one in the striped shirt and green bottoms stayed totally mute. Terrified and painfully shy, he probably thought he was under arrest. The rookie guard banished them through the eastern emergency exit, shoving the helpless boy out into an utterly foreign, massive concrete labyrinth. For 27 agonizing years, the family remained completely in the dark. The retail giant locked down the truth, utterly terrified of litigation. When the panicked mother begged for details, staffers basically gaslit her. But the kid wasn't hiding inside. He had been ejected onto the brutal asphalt. Just a first grader dumped in a sprawling maze-like vehicle grid. Totally lost, absolutely defenseless. It took until 1:55 in the afternoon, 2 agonizing hours later, to finally drag the local cops into the nightmare. Cops finally trickled in from the precinct directly opposite the mall, casually canvassing the area and questioning a few bystanders. Prepare to be absolutely infuriated because local law enforcement treated this nightmare like an absolute joke. By morning, local papers published a horrifyingly dismissive statement from authorities, claiming no foul play was suspected, assuming the boy was just wandering homeward. They branded him a simple runaway, aggressively pushing the absurd narrative that a 6-year-old could navigate 5 miles of treacherous city streets alone. It took an agonizing 45 minutes for a single uniform to pull up to the scene. 45 minutes of pure, unchecked dread. The precinct sat literally a stone's throw away. After tearing out of his Miami office and driving 45 minutes straight, the grieving father arrived to an utterly baffling lack of urgency. Furious and frantic, he demanded action. Where were the tactical units? Where was the massive manhunt? A responding cop just sneered at him, telling the frantic dad to back off, drop the attitude, and accept that children usually just wander back on their own. Screaming in disbelief, he reminded them his boy was only 6, and their family residence sat 5 grueling miles away. The child had never navigated streets alone. He begged for brass, demanded detectives, and desperately name-dropped the mayor to force their hand. They should have been turning the city upside down. Instead, the local police department effectively sat on their hands. Left completely to their own devices, the desperate father and a loyal colleague essentially occupied the precinct lobby for 2 grueling weeks. Abandoning their normal lives entirely, they even rigged an independent wiretap, praying for a ransom demand from a shadowy captor. Consumed by maternal terror during endless nights at the precinct, the boy's mother kept agonizing over her little guy's tiny yellow sandals and battered, aching feet. Shivering in just a thin shirt, as darkness swallowed the city, a terrifying realization washed over them: this investigation was disastrously off track. Desperation forced the family to cover their vehicles in giant pleas, begging their little boy to just hold on. 500,000 handbills flooded the streets, featuring a beaming, innocent child in a baseball kit, while a shattered father wept on local broadcasts. Begging any phantom kidnapper for mercy, he promised total amnesty and zero retaliation, backing the plea with a $5,000 bounty. That figure rapidly ballooned to $10,000, before skyrocketing to a staggering $100,000. The pot ultimately hit $120,000, about $365,000 modern cash. Citizens rallied, choppers swarmed the skies, and search parties scoured empty lots. Haulers monitored the interstates, trading tips over their radios, while a grieving dad literally funded fuel costs out of his own pocket to keep the hunt alive. An entire army of ordinary civilians mobilized for one stolen kid. Meanwhile, the cops were sitting on absolute zero. Some bystanders recalled a sinister dark blue van equipped with custom rims, blackout windows, and a rear ladder, but the shopping center had been an absolute madhouse. Thousands swarmed the property that afternoon, making the suspect pool virtually infinite. But the real horror was the systemic failure happening behind closed doors. Back in 1981, emergency broadcast systems for abducted kids simply did not exist. There was absolutely zero national infrastructure to protect vulnerable youth. Federal agents were legally handcuffed, completely barred from intervening without concrete evidence of interstate transport or a physical ransom demand. A week in, the press grew bored. The agonizing hunt dragged forward as optimism bled out, until a chilling conversation with the local medical examiner blew the case wide open. The morgue casually admitted they never actively shared data on unidentified remains, relying instead on archaic paper letters sent out just twice a year. When a desperate father demanded to know if his kid was logged in the federal criminal database, the official cluelessly asked what that even meant. The terrifying truth was that missing youths and Jane Doe simply weren't tracked. The revelation left the shattered dad absolutely paralyzed. How could a nation that conquered space force a grieving parent to cold call every single morgue in the state just to hunt for their murdered child? The state official shamelessly shrugged it off as a personal problem. Driven by raw panic, the father frantically dialed the 3 major broadcast networks, In 1981, media monopolies controlled the narrative. Every single network slammed the door, callously arguing that spotlighting one abducted child would set a dangerous precedent. Eventually, a prominent morning show host broke the blockade, granting the devastated parents a national broadcast to beg for their little boy's life. The tragic national plea was scheduled for August 11th, 1981, precisely 14 agonizing days after the nightmare began. Yet, on August 10th, mere hours before they were meant to go live on air, a pair of local anglers were working a dark, stagnant drainage ditch right off the highway, roughly 120 miles up the coast. Right at mile marker 130, as the fading sun threw long shadows across the water, an unidentified object bobbed up to the surface. From a distance, it looked like discarded plastic, but pulling their skiff closer revealed a gruesome horror: the decapitated remains of a young boy. Frantic calls immediately went out to dispatch. Crime scene photographers swarmed the muddy banks alongside emergency crews, while scuba units blindly scoured the murky depths for the better part of a week. The rest of his remains vanished into the abyss. By August 11th, while his desperate parents wept on national television pleading for his return, forensic teams were quietly confirming the nightmare. The moment the shattered parents touched down on their home turf, a mob of ruthless journalists ambushed them. Authorities finally delivered the fatal blow. 4 independent autopsies officially verified their worst fear. The burden of identifying the remains fell upon a deeply trusted colleague, ironically a man whose own child had once been rescued by the grieving father. Racing straight to the county morgue, he peered at the mangled remains, definitively recognizing the boy's signature gapped smile and a tiny, partially grown incisor. A severed head? Was this the missing boy? Dr. Berger arrived carrying X-rays and charting records. A lower left molar filling confirmed the coroner's grim suspicion. Absolutely identical. Years down the line, jawbone genetics linked directly back to his mother, permanently crushing those lingering cover-up whispers. Authorities choppered the remains straight to Broward County, handing the grim post-mortem duties to Dr. Ronald Wright. 5 brutal strikes shattered the skull. The killer used a 5.5-inch blade, severing the head after death. The child took the fatal hits entirely from behind while pinned face down. Fatal factors included severe oxygen deprivation, massive facial trauma, and shattered cartilage. Decay suggested the boy perished at least 10 days prior, slaughtered almost immediately after his kidnapping. No narcotics were detected inside his system. Sunken for 12 straight days, the remains only recently bobbed up. The coroner chillingly noted how incredibly fortunate the discovery was. Without those passing anglers making that gruesome catch, the child's tragic fate might have stayed forever buried. Washing the bone revealed microscopic white ceramic chips and glassy paint specks leftovers from the murder weapon itself. Bone cracks offered a blueprint of the exact weapon, yet it remained undiscovered. His parents buried an empty box to preserve the evidence. Denied burying their boy, the agony consumed them. Desperate, the father cornered the examiner. He pleaded for his boy's return. The doctor simply instructed him to drop by after hours. During an hours-long late-night session, the examiner insisted the evidence had to stay locked up, but he offered a different path forward. Channel that grief into fighting for other stolen kids. Make this nightmare matter. That singular moment rewired his destiny. Yet the immediate priority was hunting down the monster. What unfolded next became an absolute procedural nightmare for American law enforcement. Detectives immediately put everyone connected to the boy under a microscope. They played the numbers. Statistically speaking, kidnapped kids are usually taken by the people they trust most: immediate family or close friends. Naturally, the parents caught the heat first. Both husband and wife got strapped into the polygraph chair. They completely cleared it. 0 red flags. Then detectives locked their sights onto 25-year-old James Campbell. Better known as Dudley, he crashed at their place for 4 years before abruptly bailing 14 days prior to the snatching. The guy operated a waterfront rental kiosk down in Miami Beach, pitching catamarans. Early on July 27th, he pulled up to their property near 9. The father had already punched in at work. Over morning coffee, the mother requested he drag the kid along to his gig. He refused, claiming he was slammed prepping watercraft for a commercial shoot. Blaming heavy gusts, he bounced at 10 and clocked in by 10:30. Bystanders corroborated the entire timeline. Yet, intense interrogation squeezed out a total bombshell. He and the boy's mother were actively entangled in an ongoing 3-year secret romance. His initial lie detector run proved completely ambiguous. He was visibly shaking. Round 2 showed absolute honesty, even following hypnotic regression. The parents never actually suspected him of executing their boy. She downplayed the fling's intensity. But cops obsessed over this illicit love triangle angle, refusing to let the narrative die. Crack open those 10,000 pages of official police records today. You will witness blinding tunnel vision. Months of brutal interrogations followed. One detective confessed they absolutely tortured the guy. They stopped, just short of physical violence, completely trampling his constitutional liberties. Lawyering up at the family's urging finally got authorities off his back. Ultimately, the entire trio walked away totally exonerated. The manhunt pivoted. Suddenly, shocking revelations regarding a local department store watchman blew the entire case wide open. A 17-year-old undercover monitor, completely uncertified and working part-time. She booted 4 kids from the play aisles that tragic afternoon. Initially, she blamed a scuffle between the youngsters. After intervening, she dispersed the group out separate exits. Crucially, she swore she had no idea the missing kid was among them. The corporation buried the story. They outright refused to broadcast that their employee shoved unaccompanied minors out onto the street. The motive? Dodging brutal litigation and catastrophic press. But the parents uncovered it. By July 22, 1983, literally moments before the legal clock ran out, they hit the massive retailer with a lethal negligence suit. Court filings claimed the franchise fully knew creeps stalked the arcade setups. Instead of tossing the boy outside, protocols demanded she locate his folks. The corporation retaliated. Defense attorneys shifted the blame directly onto the mother for abandoning her kid, a classic contributory negligence defense. They fully intended to weaponize the family's darkest secrets in court, the infidelity, the household tension, putting every dirty detail on trial. A grieving father's fury ignited the spark. "Sears put my boy on that concrete," John Walsh declared, demanding absolute justice in court. But corporate lawyers played dirty, demanding the sealed police records of a hunt that was still breathing, still bleeding. Leaking those secrets in a civil courtroom meant the killer might walk free, forcing the family to abandon their legal war in November 1983. They pivoted to a larger crusade, rewriting the very laws protecting our youth while detectives desperately hunted for anyone who saw something. But here lies the chilling reality. Every single memory contradicted the next. One clerk brushed off the video game brawls, while a kid named James Martin recalled 2 black youths ripping the controller from an 8-year-old white child. A mall cop intervened, yet his memory remained entirely blank on whether the victim was actually Adam. It was pure pandemonium, a sea of children. And the terrifying twist? The kidnapping likely never took place inside those walls. The nightmare likely unfolded out on the scorching asphalt, rendering every single interior testimony completely useless. The real monsters were lurking among the parked cars, a blind spot the cops missed until the trail turned to absolute dust over the years. Suddenly, 14 long years after the slaughter, investigators tracked down security guard Kathy Schaefer for a second interrogation in September 1995. Her story shifted dramatically. She now felt 85% certain she had personally marched Adam Walsh right out the exit. Paralyzed by the crushing public blame, the terrified 17-year-old had kept her mouth shut, an untrained kid who never pulled the trigger. It was a catastrophic error in judgment, one she finally detailed, a confrontation involving 2 black teenagers and 2 white kids. After confirming the black youths were unaccompanied, she banished them through the north doors, before turning her attention to the white boys. The older kid admitted they were alone, while the smaller boy, clad in green shorts and a striped top, remained hauntingly silent. She commanded them to leave through the east doors, only to hear Adam's desperate mother paging him over the intercom 30 minutes later. Thrust into an unfamiliar, labyrinthine section of the shopping center, he was miles from where his mother always parked up north. Tossed out the east side, the disoriented child became incredibly vulnerable prey for roaming predators. Countless suspects would face the heat in the following decades. Edward Harold James emerged as a prime target after a 1981 arrest for snatching another kid over in Pompano Beach. A prison snitch swore James bragged about the slaughter, coaxing the boy with ice cream before decapitating him and punting his skull into a murky canal. Detectives secured a warrant, tearing apart his 1974 Plymouth Fury in a desperate hunt for biological evidence. Suspiciously, he swapped out the front upholstery in August 1981, days after the vanishing, yet forensics yielded no smoking gun. Beating a lie detector and securing an airtight alibi from his boss, the authorities had no choice but to clear his name. Enter Keith Allen Warren, a maniac who previously attempted to hack off a victim's head in Vegas using a massive machete. Another jailhouse informant pointed the finger, but Warren willingly surrendered his DNA, completely eliminating himself from the suspect pool in 2008. He confessed the lie was just a twisted flex for cell block street cred, but the darkest shadow loomed with Jeffrey Dahmer. Following his 1991 capture in Milwaukee for unimaginable atrocities, a terrifying wave of tipsters suddenly surfaced. William Bowen placed the monster outside that very Sears, while Willis Morgan tailed a creeping Dahmer from Radio Shack straight into the toy aisles. Meanwhile, Janice Santamazzino recounted swerving to avoid a blue cargo van parked aggressively by the store's exit. Stepping indoors, she locked eyes with a frantic, unkempt stranger, instantly sensing a deeply sinister aura. Years later, staring at the cannibal's mugshot on television, she absolutely recognized him, forcing investigators to dig deep. Booted from the army in early 1981, he drifted to Miami by March, ending up penniless and sleeping on the sand by July. He managed to score a gig at Sunshine Subs, slinging sandwiches between April and September of 1981. The deli owned a blue delivery van, though management swore his severe alcoholism kept him from driving it, and Dahmer adamantly denied the boy's murder. Claiming he'd gladly accept a lethal injection if guilty, he maintained his innocence, which raises a chilling psychological paradox. The serial killer confessed to his other massacres with sickening precision. What motive would he have to hide this specific nightmare? Yet this was a master manipulator who successfully deceived his own dad, defense attorneys, and seasoned detectives for decades. Lacking his own wheels in 1981, he'd have needed to hijack the company truck, slaughter the boy, and return the vehicle completely undetected. A dark possibility? Absolutely. But pinning it on him legally? Completely impossible. On August 7th, 1981, just 3 days before the gruesome discovery, a passing trucker spotted a blue van idling by the murky swamp. Through the darkness, a figure gripped a flashlight, violently emptying a white bucket straight into the stagnant water. Decades down the line, that trucker stared at the killer's photograph and recognized the phantom. Yet, no indictment ever came down. Fleeing Florida for Ohio barely weeks after the vanishing, his trail evaporated. But the nightmare truly deepened with Ottis Toole. On October 10th, 1983, a harrowing broadcast captured 38 million viewers, concluding with a heartbreaking montage of stolen youth. A tip line flickers across the television broadcast. By the morning of October 11th, a Brevard County investigator receives a chilling, unsolicited admission of guilt. Enter Ottis Toole, a transient arsonist sitting behind bars, suddenly dropping twisted breadcrumbs about slaughtering a young boy. The hints quickly morphed into a blatant claim. He and his partner, Henry Lee Lucas, had snatched a kid maybe 7 to 10 years of age right out of a Fort Lauderdale department store. He listed the outfit: denim pants, a blue top, and running shoes. But there was a glaring issue. None of that matched what little Adam was wearing. The suspect botched the age and the wardrobe completely. Still, Toole insisted they were cruising in a two-tone luxury sedan with their terrified captive trapped in the back. As they sped north, the child fought back relentlessly. According to the story, Lucas pinned the thrashing boy down before ordering Toole to veer onto an isolated dirt stretch. He claimed his accomplice took a heavy blade and decapitated the child with 3 or 4 savage strikes. A gruesome tale, except for one massive, glaring hole in the narrative. On the very afternoon this nightmare unfolded, Henry Lee Lucas was sitting inside a Maryland prison cell. He physically could not have been there. Caught in the lie, the arsonist immediately pivoted. Suddenly, he was a lone wolf, confessing he only implicated his former partner as revenge for the murder of his own niece. These two drifters had crossed paths at a Jacksonville shelter back in 1976, sparking a twisted romance that evolved into a nationwide reign of terror. The duo ultimately built a notorious reputation, with Lucas taking credit for 600 bodies and Toole claiming 125. Law enforcement dubbed them the confession killers. In reality, their gruesome claims were mostly fabricated garbage, designed to manipulate the system for what detectives cynically referred to as fast food and field trips. It was all a twisted game to escape solitary confinement, gorge on complimentary meals, and take joyrides under the guise of locating phantom grave sites. Over time, this suspect bounced between claiming responsibility and denying it no less than 4 separate times, detailing how he baited his prey using sweets and trinkets. According to this version, the boy climbed inside freely before panicking. The drifter allegedly knocked him unconscious, hit the turnpike, and sped north for roughly 10 minutes. He then described pulling onto a remote, unpaved shoulder, forcing the unconscious child onto his stomach. 4 or 5 brutal hacks with a heavy blade ended it all. Chillingly, that specific strike count aligned perfectly with classified autopsy findings that had never leaked to the press. In his sickest admission yet, he claimed to have cruised around with the severed remains sitting right beside him in the passenger seat. He eventually moved the horrific cargo to the floor, before dumping it into a waterway near a wooden walkway. Investigators later tracked down the 1971 vehicle he supposedly drove. The luxury sedan was actually registered to a woman who had forcefully taken it back after the drifter defaulted on his cash installments. Authorities located the abandoned ride sitting in a dusty lot. Armed with a warrant, they ripped it apart, discovering a missing trunk liner before dousing the interior with chemical reactant on November 2, 1983. The chemical reaction was blinding. Deep crimson splatters illuminated across both the front and rear driver's side carpets. Then came the agonizing twist. Back in 1983, forensic science was simply too primitive to prove whether the gore belonged to a human being or an animal. Detectives locked the contaminated materials in a local evidence vault, waiting half a year for the primary jurisdiction to retrieve the critical find. The transfer never happened. In a catastrophic oversight, the vehicle was handed right back to its owner and crushed for scrap metal by 1985. Every stained fiber evaporated into thin air. A decade later, in 1995, a federal operative contacted the grieving father, desperate to analyze those missing floor mats. Modern genetic testing could have shattered the mystery wide open. But when federal authorities demanded the samples from the local precinct, they received a horrifying answer. It was completely gone. The single tangible thread of forensic truth capable of securing a conviction had inexplicably disappeared. Years later, an expert analyzing the original chemical reactive photographs claimed to see a haunting visage perfectly outlined within the carpet's dark stains. The mother remains entirely convinced that those shadows formed her murdered son's face, though the absolute truth was stolen by gross negligence. Detectives ruthlessly hunted down the suspect's paper trail, interviewing clinics, service stations, and local parishes to rebuild his exact daily movements. They verified his presence in Florida during May of 1981, following a family death, later proving he secured charity transport from a Virginia clinic on July 24th. By the 25th of July, he had officially rolled back into town. He alleged he unearthed $300 buried in the ashes of his childhood home, before heading down to the bay on the 26th to solicit strangers. The very next day, the young boy vanished without a trace. By August 1st, the transient relocated to a cheap motel, where his own sibling brutally attacked him over a hijacked pickup. Official records backed up the beating, yet during that critical 4-day window surrounding the abduction, the drifter's exact whereabouts remained a terrifying blank space. Law enforcement started driving the suspect around, initially stopping at a decoy shopping center to test his geographical memory. He instantly called their bluff, noting the architectural differences. But when they pulled up to the actual crime scene, his demeanor shifted, muttering that he recognized it. Investigators then hauled him to milepost 126 along the highway, where he casually suggested he might have dumped the remains. High-tech subterranean scanners swept the entire perimeter, yielding absolutely zero physical evidence. Further up the road near milepost 130, the genuine recovery site, he gestured toward a timber overpass, claiming that was his disposal spot. But doubt lingered. Detectives had accidentally flashed him a photograph of that exact structure earlier that week, meaning he was likely just parroting their own intel back at them. The narrative continued to fracture, At one point, he absurdly claimed he incinerated the corpse inside a broken appliance at his family's property. When that failed, he said he shoved the remains into the back of his vehicle, soaked it all, and trashed everything at a local landfill, including the blood-soaked lining. Yet, when crime scene units scoured his family's overgrown lot, they unearthed a pair of olive-colored bottoms and a single bright sneaker. His parents swore the belongings weren't his, yet investigators withheld them for years. A January 1984 backyard dig yielded nothing but animal remains, a brutal dead end. Forensics analyzed multiple blades, including a bayonet and a machete. Absolutely nothing aligned with the violent trauma inflicted upon the boy's skull. A latent print on a taped hilt led nowhere. Hair follicles pulled from that infamous Cadillac had rotted far beyond any usable genetic profiling. This forced investigators to ultimately cross-reference the recovered jawbone with his mother's genetics, definitively locking in the boy's identity. The drifter dodged formal charges entirely. Lacking hard forensic proof, prosecutors simply refused to pull the trigger on a trial. September 15, 1996. The suspect took his final breath behind bars, his liver ravaged by disease. Just before expiring, he supposedly spilled his darkest secret to his niece, Sarah. She sat by his side in December 1995, returning the following year to watch him wither away on his deathbed. Pressing him, she demanded if he slaughtered the boy. His chilling reply, "Yeah, I murdered that kid. It actually weighed on my conscience, too." The victim's father would later reveal local detectives were completely blind to the killer's deteriorating condition. Not a single cop bothered to interrogate him one last time. Desperate for closure in 2008, the grieving parents brought in retired investigator Joe Matthews. He relentlessly combed through 10,000 pages of dusty case files. His verdict? The confessed drifter was undeniably guilty. Digging deeper, he unearthed undeveloped film revealing a horrifying, bloody facial impression left right on the suspect's floor mat. Local law enforcement heavily scrutinized the retired cop's independent findings. They couldn't dispute it. On December 16, 2008, the police chief stepped in front of the flashing cameras. With the family standing by, the chief officially slammed the book shut. Authorities were finally convinced they had their monster. He offered a sobering public apology for the botched leads, vanished evidence, and systemic blunders. The grieving father stepped up, declaring the tragedy wouldn't be a meaningless loss. He urged other abandoned families to keep fighting for their day in court. Yet, shadows of doubt still lingered among skeptics. Dissenters quickly pointed out glaring holes in the initial confession. The suspect fumbled basic facts, the victim's clothing, physical details, even his exact age. He couldn't even point out the boy's photograph. Worse, he placed his criminal partner at the bloody scene while that accomplice was locked up in a cell. His statements conveniently mirrored whatever narrative investigators spoon-fed him. Some still suspect a notorious Milwaukee serial killer snatched the boy in a company van, sanitized the mess, and walked away. Ultimately, both suspects met their maker. The cannibal was beaten to death in lockup, while the drifter rotted away in a clinical ward. Their reigns of terror are permanently over. Yet, out of this unspeakable nightmare emerged something miraculous, a lasting legacy. Two shattered parents weaponized their agonizing heartbreak, sparking an absolute legislative uprising. The catalyst struck when a medical examiner brutally told the father, "We must hold on to your boy's body, but you can go save the others. Give his death a purpose." His mother immediately dropped out of college. Together, they launched a groundbreaking nonprofit sanctuary, fiercely dedicated to hunting down abducted and severely mistreated youth. Hollywood came knocking, producing a primetime broadcast. They secured $150,000 for the rights, pouring every cent back into their protective mission. Following the premiere, an extra $40,000 flooded their accounts. Faces flashed during the credits were actually rescued, suddenly awakening a naive nation to the terrifying reality of predators. Against all odds, the couple's marriage survived the horror, and they went on to raise 3 more kids. By October 1982, the Oval Office enacted landmark legislation, establishing a federal FBI task force. For the first time ever, abducted minors were officially tracked in national criminal databases. The grieving father relentlessly lobbied for a centralized violent crime network, an innovative system designed exclusively to hunt down roaming serial predators. Their humble nonprofit evolved into the nation's premier missing children's network. As of today, they've successfully dragged more than 360,000 kids out of the shadows. Process that number for a second. 360,000. Fast forward to 2006, the federal government cemented the boy's name into sweeping national protection laws. This legislation massively broadened predator watch lists, pioneered a registry for chronic abusers, and weaponized the justice system to come down mercilessly on anyone targeting youth. Stepping in front of the camera, the father helmed a legendary fugitive hunting show. Over a 23-year reign, he personally helped put 1,100 dangerous criminals behind bars. He didn't stop there, launching multiple spin-off investigative series to track down outlaws, while simultaneously inspiring a revolutionary retail security protocol. That emergency alert system is now standard in every major retailer nationwide. The moment a kid vanishes from an aisle, an overhead page triggers a total facility lockdown. Staff flood the exits. The doors stay bolted until that kid is safe. This is the monumental shadow cast by a vibrant 6-year-old who just wanted to sketch and swing a bat. A sweet kid who clung to his parents, obsessed over morning cartoons, and spent hours glued to an 8-bit console. A child robbed of the chance to build a career, start a family, and simply experience the fundamental right of growing older. Instead, his savage murder acted as the bloody catalyst for a massive cultural reckoning. Legislation shifted. Defenses were built. He became the unseen guardian angel guiding thousands of stolen kids safely home. One sweltering afternoon in 1981, a predator snatched a little boy right out of a department store. An innocent future snuffed out in an instant. Yet the shockwaves of his absence practically shielded an entire generation from the same dark fate. Out of unimaginable evil, an unbreakable safety net was forged. In the end, the horrific sacrifice of one little boy changed the world forever. We must honor his memory by refusing to be complacent. Because of Adam, we now have the Code Adam protocol, a facility lockdown that triggers the moment a child is missing, ensuring no other parent has to face the silence of an empty aisle. Adam's parents transformed their agonizing heartbreak into a legislative uprising, creating a legacy that has rescued over 360,000 children from the shadows. Let us carry Adam's story as an unseen guardian angel, a vow that we will never stop fighting to bring every child home. His sacrifice changed the world, reminding us that out of unimaginable evil, we must forge an unbreakable safety net for the generations to come. The tragic story of Adam Walsh is a harrowing reminder that the safety of a child can vanish in a heartbeat. On a sweltering afternoon in 1981, a vibrant 6-year-old was snatched from the supposed safety of a department store toy aisle. This wasn't just a local tragedy. It was the moment American innocence died, exposing a nation that had no net to catch its stolen children. The ultimate lesson from Adam's short life is that vigilance is our most sacred duty.